Imagine walking across a frozen landscape, knowing that just beneath the ice lies a creature that died 40,000 years ago, yet looks as if it passed only yesterday. As unbelievable as it sounds, there have been cases where people have cooked and eaten the meat of animals preserved for over 36,000 years. And today, scientists are seriously working toward bringing the woolly mammoth back possibly as soon as 2028. What you're about to hear may challenge everything you thought you understood about extinction. If that already feels hard to grasp, the story of the woolly mammoth goes even further. In 2010, deep within the Siberian permafrost, researchers discovered a remarkably well-preserved baby mammoth, later named Yuka. She had been frozen for nearly 39,000 years. But what truly stunned scientists wasn't just the intact body, it was her brain. The brain was preserved in extraordinary detail. Its folds, its structure, even tiny blood vessels remained visible, as though time had simply stopped at the moment of death. For paleontologists, Yuka wasn't just another rare specimen, she was a window into the past. By studying her brain, researchers found striking similarities to modern elephants. This offered new insight into how mammoths may have thought, moved, and adapted to the harsh Ice Age environment. For the first time, we weren't just seeing what mammoths looked like, we were beginning to understand how they lived. But perhaps the most remarkable part of this story is happening right now. Using DNA preserved in ice, like that found in Yuka, a biotechnology company called Colossal is pursuing something once thought impossible, bringing the mammoth back. By combining mammoth DNA with that of the Asian elephant, its closest living relative, they hope to create an animal that carries the defining traits of this long-extinct species within the next few years. If successful, this would mark more than just a scientific breakthrough. It could become the first time in human history that we've brought an extinct species back into the world. And as the line between extinct and returning begins to blur, it may be time to reconsider how we understand nature and the role we play within it. If the idea of bringing the woolly mammoth back begins to blur the line between past and present, then the next story takes us somewhere even more immediate, where humans don't just study history, they actually taste it. In 1979, in the remote wilderness of Alaska, a gold miner made an unexpected discovery. Trapped deep within the permafrost was the frozen remains of an ancient steppe bison, an animal that had been preserved for more than 36,000 years. Scientists later gave it the name Blue Babe, inspired by the unusual bluish crystals that had formed across its frozen skin over thousands of years under rare natural conditions. What made this discovery truly remarkable was its level of preservation. The muscles, skin, and even patches of fur remained so intact that many described it as looking like it had died only recently. It wasn't just a fossil, it was a body, suspended in time. But what set this story apart and sparked real controversy was a decision made by paleontologist Dale Guthrie. During his research, he cut a small portion of meat from the animal's neck, cooked it with vegetables, and served it as part of an actual meal. So, it may sound shocking, but for Guthrie, this wasn't a reckless act. It was, in his view, another way of understanding the animal not just through its anatomy or DNA, but as a living part of an ancient ecosystem, once part of the natural food chain. When asked about the taste, he described the meat as tough, dry, and carrying a strong, earthy flavor far from appealing, but not entirely inedible. Of course, the idea of eating a creature that lived long before the earliest human civilizations is something few would ever consider. Yet this moment reveals a different side of science, one that doesn't always observe from a distance, but sometimes engages in ways that challenge our comfort and expectations. And perhaps that's what makes this one of the strangest meals in scientific history, a moment when the past wasn't just uncovered, but, in a very real sense, brought back to the table. If the story of Blue Babe shows just how close we can come to touching the past, then this next discovery brings a very different feeling, less about closeness and more about something deeply unsettling. In the frozen ground of Siberia, researchers uncovered two cave lion cubs, later named Sparta and Boris. At first, it seemed like a routine paleontological find, but when scientists analyzed them, the results raised more questions than answers. Sparta lived around 28,000 years ago, while Boris was far older, dating back roughly 43,000 years. And yet, despite that 15,000-year gap, their bodies were found in nearly the same location, just a few dozen meters apart. That contrast is hard to ignore. And a small distance in space, but an enormous distance in time, long enough for entire ecosystems to change. It led scientists to consider a haunting possibility that this region may have remained frozen and undisturbed for tens of thousands of years, almost like a time trap, where anything that enters is preserved, untouched by the passage of time. What makes the discovery even more remarkable is the condition of the cubs, especially Sparta. She is considered one of the best preserved Ice Age animals ever found. Her fur is still soft. Her skin remains largely intact. Even internal organs show minimal decomposition. Looking at her, there's an almost eerie impression, as if, with just a bit of warmth, life might somehow return. As adults, cave lions were among the most formidable predators of their time. They could reach lengths of up to 11 feet, with powerful builds capable of taking down large prey like wild horses or even young mammoths. But here, we don't see those fearsome hunters. Instead, we see two small cubs, frozen in silence, quiet remnants of a world long gone. And when you consider the strange coincidence of Sparta and Boris, it's hard not to wonder, is this simply chance, or a clue pointing to something we don't yet fully understand? Because sometimes, nature doesn't just preserve life, it preserves mysteries that still lie beyond our ability to explain. If the discovery of the cave lion cubs gives us the feeling of time being frozen in place, then the next creature expands that perspective beyond a single location, to an entire continent once dominated by giants. I am talking about the woolly rhinoceros, a species that once roamed vast stretches of land from Spain all the way to China, covering the cold grasslands of the Ice Age. For centuries, scientists could only imagine what these animals looked like based on fossils. But in 2007, everything changed. As Siberian permafrost began to thaw, researchers uncovered a remarkably well-preserved adult female woolly rhino, later named Kale Lima. She had been buried for around 40,000 years. Unlike fragmented fossils, this specimen offered a nearly complete picture, revealing thick fur, massive build, and the physical traits that allowed the species to survive in extreme cold. Then, in 2015, another discovery added an even more personal layer to the story. Scientists found a juvenile woolly rhino, estimated to be about 10,000 years old, with its fur still clearly visible and two small horns already forming on its skull. Finds like this are incredibly rare, and they provided valuable insight into how these animals grew and developed from a young age. But perhaps the most thought-provoking part of this story lies in the present. When scientists compared DNA and biological traits, they identified the closest living relative of the woolly rhinoceros, the Sumatran rhino, and the contrast is striking. Once, this lineage dominated an entire continent. Today, its closest relative survives only in isolated pockets of dense forest, with a population so small that it now stands on the brink of extinction. This isn't just a story of evolution. It's a reflection of how dramatically our world has changed, and how human impact has shaped that change over time. A species that once seemed too widespread, too resilient to disappear now exists only as a fragile remnant, struggling to survive. And when you look at that journey, the question shifts. It's no longer just about why these giants vanished, but whether the species still with us today may be heading down the same path. If the story of the woolly rhinoceros makes us reflect on the decline of a once dominant species, then the cave bear offers a different perspective, less dramatic perhaps, but just as thought-provoking. Contrary to the common image of a fierce predator, research suggests that cave bears were largely plant eaters. Their diet consisted mainly of roots, berries, and grasses surprisingly similar to that of modern pandas. For an animal of such massive size, this gentle feeding behavior often comes as a surprise. And yet, that seemingly peaceful lifestyle wasn't enough to ensure their survival. During the harsh winters of the Ice Age, cave bears would retreat deep into caves to hibernate, but not all of them made it through. Many died in their sleep, unable to withstand the extreme cold or lacking the energy reserves needed to survive the long winter. At the same time, they faced other threats, powerful predators like cave lions, and early humans who competed for the same caves as shelter from the cold. With around 24,000 years ago, cave bears gradually disappeared, but their story didn't end there. Across Europe, their bones remained accumulating over thousands of years inside caves, sometimes covering entire cave floors. When people in the Middle Ages stumbled upon these enormous skeletons, they had no scientific framework to explain what they were seeing. So they turned to the only explanation that made sense to them at the time: dragons. Some researchers believe that these discoveries may have helped inspire early dragon legends, at least in part. For a long time, it seemed like that was where the story ended. But in 2020, reindeer herders in Siberia made an extraordinary discovery: a cave bear preserved almost entirely intact in permafrost, its nose, its fur still clearly visible. For scientists, it was a rare and valuable opportunity to study the species in far greater detail. And when you bring all these pieces together, from diet and survival to the traces left behind in human culture, you begin to see something deeper. The line between science and myth isn't always as clear as we might think, because perhaps those stories of dragons didn't come purely from imagination, but from real creatures that once walked this earth. If the story of the cave bear makes us reflect on the thin line between myth and science, then this next discovery takes us even further, to a place where the past doesn't just appear preserved, it almost seems alive. This is the story of the Lena Horse, one of the most astonishing Ice Age discoveries ever made. In the Siberian permafrost, scientists uncovered the body of a foal that had been preserved for around 42,000 years. What makes this find especially striking is its age at death, just 1 to 2 weeks old, a life that had barely begun yet, one that has been held in time with extraordinary detail. Its fur remains soft and intact. The structure of its body is clearly visible. Even internal biological traces have survived in ways rarely seen before. But the most shocking detail is this: researchers discovered liquid blood inside its body, not dried residue, not chemical traces, but actual liquid blood, making it one of the oldest known samples ever found in that state. Even more surprising, traces of urine were still present in the bladder, an almost unheard of level of preservation. These details suggest that permafrost doesn't just slow decay, it can effectively freeze an organism's biological state in time. Because of this, the Lena horse has become the focus of an ambitious scientific goal: cloning. Researchers are attempting to extract viable DNA from its preserved tissues, with the hope of creating an embryo that could be implanted into a modern horse. In theory, if successful, this wouldn't be a reconstruction or a simulation. It would be the return of a living organism from tens of thousands of years ago. Of course, the challenges are enormous. DNA degrades over time, even in frozen conditions. But the discovery of liquid blood has opened a door that once seemed firmly closed. And if one day a Lena horse were to walk the earth again, it wouldn't just mark a scientific breakthrough. It would be a moment unlike any before in human history, a time when we witness, with our own eyes, a life form stepping out of the Ice Age and back into the present. If the Lena horse makes us believe that a creature could one day return from the Ice Age, then this final discovery brings something very different: not hope, but a mystery that still has no clear answer. In 2011, deep within the Siberian permafrost, scientists uncovered the body of a wolf pup estimated to be around 14,000 years old. Its condition was extraordinary: fur, teeth, claws, everything remained intact, as if time had barely touched it. But what makes this specimen truly significant isn't just its preservation, it's where it sits in the story of evolution. This wolf lived during a period when wolves were beginning to change in ways that would eventually lead to the domesticated dogs we know today. Because of that, many researchers believe it could represent an important and early step in the long relationship between humans and dogs. And yet, the most surprising discovery was found inside its body. When scientists examined the pup's stomach, they found partially undigested tissue. DNA analysis revealed something no one expected. It had eaten woolly rhinoceros meat. That single detail opens the door to a series of unanswered questions. How could a young wolf have consumed part of such a massive animal? Was it feeding alongside a pack after a hunt, scavenging from a carcass left behind? Or is there another explanation we haven't yet considered? No one can say for certain, but that uncertainty is exactly what makes this discovery so powerful. For the first time, we're not just looking at a preserved animal, we're witnessing a specific moment from its life, its final meal. And through that small but meaningful detail, we come closer to the Ice Age than ever before, not through speculation, but through direct, physical evidence. In a way, this may be one of the rare moments where history isn't just interpreted, it's preserved almost exactly as it happened, because somewhere within that small body, this wolf pup may have carried a trace of one of the final meals from a world that no longer exists. And when you step back and look at all these discoveries together, a deeper realization begins to take shape. Ice doesn't just preserve creatures, it preserves stories that were never told. We may have uncovered parts of the past, but so much still lies beyond the reach of modern science. So let me ask you, if you had the chance to bring one species back, which one would you choose?